On this edition of the Iowa Business Report,
what is it that's going to move us forward into the future, both short-term and long-term?
helping rural communities reach their full potential. A federal fund designed to revitalize rural health care. And in our business profile, we'll introduce you to an L-Cater company that trains the next generation of drone pilots. This is the Iowa Business Report for the third weekend of October 2025.
The Iowa Business Report is a copyrighted production of Totally Iowa Media, which is solely responsible for its content. For more, click on the radio programs button at totallyiowa.com. Here is Jeff Stein.
The Iowa Rural Development Council this past week announced the selection of 10 local leadership initiatives to receive funding for training under the Spark Leadership Grant Program. It's just one of an expanding number of ways the IRDC is helping Iowa's rural areas to thrive. Bill Menner is Executive Director of the Iowa Rural Development Council.
We're a statewide nonprofit focused on small town vitality. We're public-private. We have federal partners, state partners, educational partners like the University of Northern Iowa, foundations, businesses, and anybody who's got their toe in rural Iowa, I think wants to be part of our group because we are all about helping small towns figure out how to get things done.
Let's talk about the Spark Leadership Grant Program. This is something that you sent some news out about within the past few days. This is another one of these great partnerships between an entity, a business, if you will, and the Iowa Rural Development Council.
Yeah, Alliant Energy came to us more than a year ago and said, hey, we're seeing some challenges in some places where small towns and their leaders, whether elected leaders or civic, need some help getting their arms around their roles. And we, with Alliance Help, created a grant program to help local leadership programs hire trainers, bring somebody in to talk about leadership generation or next generation or being civil in public settings. I mean, just sort of the basics of how do you lead or how do you create new leaders in your small town. And so we provided what I think are really small grants of $2,500 or less to help towns do this sort of leadership training. And in fact, we wound up making 10 different grants this week. For example, Buchanan County, Charles City, Oelwein was another one. Frankly, all over the state, folks that are and local leadership programs that are being intentional about how they prepare the next generation of leaders and frankly, the existing generation of leaders too. And that was a partnership between the Rural Development Council, Alliant Energy, and honestly, the governor's Empower Rural Iowa Task Force. They took a head-on approach to rural leadership when it was first created by the governor some 7 years ago.
In the same way that no two towns can reach their potential in the same way, I trust these 10 counties or cities, depending on which grant we're talking about, they did not all have the same template. What are some of the ways that were unique that led to the awarding of a grant? What were some of the templates that were used that fit their very specific needs?
Well, in some cases, these are places, either a county or a community, or frankly, a region that has an existing leadership development program. Oftentimes, it's a year-long process where once a month, would-be leaders or existing leaders come together and learn different elements. So in some cases, this was a way to supplement an effort that's already going on. Sometimes it's a special training focused on employers, major industries. In one case, municipal employees doing a very targeted training to help them either expand their potential, address current needs in the communities, or try to head off challenges and issues that might be emerging. So each one of these was very different and very specific to their location, their community, and their geography.
But they all do have the commonality of how do you build and grow moving forward. It was not just a one-shot deal. It was not just so a couple of people benefit. It sounds like the whole point of it is how do we grow and nurture either our existing people and or the next generations.
Absolutely. And I think each of these applicants is to be applauded because they're thinking ahead. They're thinking very proactively about what is it that's going to move us forward into the future, both short term and long term. And honestly, it's having leaders. And as I go around the state, I can tell you without a doubt, the defining characteristic of a successful small town is a core group of strong leaders. Without those leaders, nothing happens.
As you travel the state and you visit communities and evaluate programs, et cetera, see what's working here, what's not working there, are there any common challenges that we face as we near 2026? Are there some themes that you hear about more than a few times?
Well, in addition to that challenge of leadership, who's pushing the ball uphill, which is usually the case in a small town? How are we dealing with a smaller population, oftentimes a population that's older or aging, population that might have more chronic disease? I mean, there's an unfair characterization of rural communities as being older, sicker, and poorer. And if you look at the numbers, that might be true. If you also look at the numbers, rural folks are more entrepreneurial, more likely to have started a business, more likely to own their home, more likely to have served in the military. So there are these dichotomies that come with living in a small town, but certainly leadership is a challenge. Honestly, access to affordable housing, affordable childcare, those are challenges. Access to workforce right now for local business and industry is a challenge because what we've seen is that with the exception of the I-380 corridor between Iowa City and Cedar Rapids and the I-35 corridor between Ames and Des Moines, many of our other areas of the state are declining in population. So that immediately tells me we have to address workforce issues. We have to create vibrant communities where people want to live and work and play and go to school. And what are the barriers to that? Access to housing, access to childcare, access to healthcare. So the smart small towns are working very strategically at addressing those needs.
The Iowa Rural Summit has grown, I would suggest, exponentially in this decade. And it suggests to me that you might be in a rural area and think, well, we're just out here. But it doesn't take long to find folks that you can connect with to help bridge the gap between where you are now and where you want to be. And that seems like something that over the past decade has really increased and improved thanks to the Rural Development Council's efforts.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the folks who have been coming to every summit since 2016. And there is a core group of the regulars who have been to every single one of them, even in 2020 when we had to do it remotely. And we've had consistently 300 to 350 people from across the state coming together. What's different about 2026, beyond the fact that it's our 10th Rural Summit, is that we're in Dubuque. And we have the capacity for as many as 500 people to show up. And that was intentional. We see a chance to celebrate some of the physical beauty of Northeast Iowa and talk about placemaking and tourism and arts and culture and some of the things that make Northeast Iowa special. We hope we have 500 folks from across rural Iowa in every corner of the state, plus Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota coming to join us.
Bill Menner is Executive Director of the Iowa Rural Development Council, online at iowardc.org. We spoke via Zoom on Thursday, October 16th. The group is now focused on issuing grants in partnership with the Wells Fargo Foundation. We'll have more on that opportunity here next week. Still to come, big, beautiful rural health care. And later, driver's ed for drones. You're listening to the Iowa Business Report. Do you know the signs of business fraud? Don't let bad actors catch you off guard. Stay vigilant for cases of imposter scams, financial fraud, business identity theft, and cyber attacks. It starts with recognition. Learn how to identify signs of fraud and where to report it. Visit sos.iowa.gov/protectyourbusiness to get started. This message is presented by the Iowa Secretary of State. Welcome back to the Iowa Business Report. I'm Jeff Stein. Part of the reconciliation bill signed into law by the President on Independence Day was establishment of the Rural Health Transformation Program. Now, under this program, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, will distribute $50 billion to states, $10 billion per year for 5 years, to support the delivery of health care in rural areas. Iowa Congressman Randy Feenstra told me he was excited about the fund and the economic opportunities it will provide to boost Iowa's rural areas.
You cannot be waiting a half hour for an ambulance to show up. Time is everything. If you have a heart attack or a stroke, we want them taken care of at our local hospitals. And in the Midwest, we're seeing maternity units and healthcare units closing at an alarming rate. We've got to make sure that we put dollars into our health care in the Midwest. So we have a $50 billion rural hospital fund to be used to grow maternal care, cancer treatment care, oncology. I mean, there's so many areas our state's really struggling in, and this gives us a great opportunity to get some of these dollars and make sure that our hospitals and our maternity units stay open and that people can access them and have quality, affordable, accessible care. We got to have strong rural hospital areas, and they're all hanging on by a thread right now, and that's why I'm so passionate about this issue. There's a lot of moving parts, not only in the state, but at the federal level, helping support what the state is doing.
CMS opened the application period in September. States must submit a one-time application and rural health transformation plan by November 5th. Coming up, training pilots. You're listening to the Iowa Business Report. Do you know the signs of business fraud? Don't let bad actors catch you off guard. Stay vigilant for cases of imposter scams, financial fraud, business identity theft, and cyber attacks. It starts with recognition. Learn how to identify signs of fraud and where to report it. Visit sos.iowa.gov/protectyourbusiness to get started. This message is presented by the Iowa Secretary of State. Welcome back to the Iowa Business Report. I'm Jeff Stein. In this week's business profile, you'll meet Mark Collins of Drone Experts of Elkader. They recently received a grant from the Main Street Iowa Open for Business competition, presenting in person along with other applicants. And as you'll learn, they don't just have their head in the clouds.
We were awarded $15,000 and really happy to represent Elkader as part of the Open for Business grant. And there were a lot of tough competitors, and we were just happy to go away with $15,000. We are an innovative business that's training the next generation of drone pilots, supporting first responders, and transforming how we use rural technology in Iowa. I was a professor at Indiana State University where I headed up the Unmanned Systems program. And there, as part of the program, we would have employers coming to us every year and offer us internships for our students. And the amount of internships exceeded the amount of students we had. So, I saw that there was a huge demand, but not enough students coming up through the pipeline. And then after my tenure at Indiana State, I realized that there was a huge need in Iowa. My father is originally from Elkader, and when they moved back in 2009, I moved a business from the Chicagoland area to Elkader in 2014, operated a sign business there up through 2022. But I was working from away because I was a professor at Indiana State University. My heart wasn't into the signs, and I sold the business to a company called Think Inc., which moved the business from our location at 302 West Bridge Street to the old Dollar General store in town, which left our building vacant for about a year. And understanding the need for drone training in Northeast Iowa, I decided to start Drone Experts with the focus on training the next generation of drone professionals, all the way from high school, college, and adults to try to bring more education, more awareness. Currently, it's kind of like the Wild West of drones out there. People are not aware of the rules and regulations. They do not know how to fly them. When they get their first drone, they usually crash. So drones aren't toys. They're essential tools in today's world, used for search and rescue, precision agriculture, survey, inspection, and more. We're just located 15 minutes from the Mississippi River, and where people and animals go missing all the time. And the terrain, it's very difficult for first responders to move through, and the dense vegetation makes it almost impossible to find missing people. But with a thermal drone, we can usually find these people within minutes, and saving time, money, and resources. In precision agriculture, a thermal imaging drone can help detect crop stress, soil moisture, irrigation leaks, livestock movement. These are things that a farmer might miss until it's too late. With drone data, we can help save them time, water, money while increasing their yields. By 2030, there's going to be, according to the AUVSI, which is the Association of Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, a 25% compound annual growth rate all the way through 2030. So it's huge growth, huge demand, but not enough people to fill that demand. So that's why I started Drone Experts. Most people have never flown a drone, so they don't have the hand-eye coordination and the stick and rudder controls. So a lot of times we'll start them off on a computer-based trainer. That's usually a lot more difficult than these drones that we can get. And once they develop the skills, we'll start off with the smaller drone and then gradually increase the difficulty and the complexity of the aircraft, just like they do in a pilot training program. We treat these things like airplanes. We track the maintenance, we track the time, we track our flight hours, and before we go out, we check the airspace and winds. So that's what we're doing. And one thing very difficult about this business, it's very capital intensive, and having the grants and the help through workforce education development and open for business grants, that's really helping us this first couple years in business, stay in business, because it takes a lot through marketing and outreach to develop the contacts to get the repetitive business. So the grant really will help us. And what we're going to use the grant for is we're going to use it to purchase thermal imaging drones for agriculture and first responder use. We're going to use it to purchase extra parts and batteries and develop a marketing campaign that'll help grow our enrollment and reach new customers. We've already invested in our classroom space. So here in Elkader, we have seating for up to 30 students, and it's a high-tech classroom with cameras and with equipment, 3D printers. We have soldering stations to help teach students the mechanics of drones. So we just now need all of your help to let people know that we have this business here in Northeast Iowa. It's ready to help take training and drone training to the next level. There are specific requirements governed under 14 Part 107, and those are the certification requirements to be a drone pilot. And they're much like they are for a regular pilot that flies manned aircraft, only that they're staying on the ground. So the written test is much like a private pilot test. Currently, the FAA only have a written test, whereas when you take a pilot test, you have a written, practical, and oral exam. I suspect that will be the same as they introduce, allow us as drone operators to find beyond visual line of sight and above in airspace above 400 feet. Currently, the regulation allows us to stay below 400 feet and within line of sight. But particularly in ag operations, there's less risk of falling on people's heads or hitting a car. So the FAA are already starting to allow farmers to operate multiple aircraft at a time with the ag spraying operations. It's going to take a while for the public to be confident about these drones flying over there. So, the FAA are taking baby steps for integration, the crawl, walk, run approach. And part of that approach is, with the Part 107 and within line of sight. Now we have what's called remote ID, which is broadcasting a signal, much like a license plate we have on our cars. This enables people who are in the area to identify where the pilot is and where the aircraft is. And that's providing more confidence to the public to enable more complex operations. As the FAA are doing it slowly, we'll get certified as drone pilots, and as they allow more complex operations, we'll just add that to our repertoire. Here at Drone Experts, we're not only training people on the written, but we're giving them practical experience in real aircraft so that when they go out in the field, they'll have the tools they need to not crash and be able to fly safely. And that will earn confidence by the public to allow more complex operations years. In agriculture, this is where we're seeing most of the demand right now. It's about 70% of the demand in the drone industry is in the ag industry. So we feel, being located in remote Northeast Iowa, we're in the right location at the right time. And this will help bring more awareness that we are here. And, companies, they can send their employees here for a day or two. We can go on site and train them on the Part 107 requirements. After they get the remote pilot certificate, then they could go on to more advanced training in agriculture or first responder, construction survey, photography, videography, or hobbyist.
Mark Collins of Drone Experts in Elkader, recipient of a $15,000 Open for Business grant from Main Street, Iowa in August of this year. Thanks to Tim Harwood from IBR affiliate KXEL for sharing his conversation with Mark Collins with us. And that brings us to the close of this week's program. We're back again next week at this same time. In the meantime, you can listen to all or part of today's program by going to totallyiowa.com and clicking on the radio programs link. We're also found on all the major podcast distributors, 19 now in all. Support for the Iowa Business Report comes from the Iowa Business Council, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization working to elevate Iowa's economy through leadership, research, and advocacy. Learn more and review the group's annual competitive dashboard report by going to iowabusinesscouncil.org. We welcome your comments. Send them by email to radio@totallyiowa.com. I'm Jeff Stein. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a prosperous week.
The Iowa Business Report is a copyrighted production of Totally Iowa Media, which is solely responsible for its content. For more, click on the radio programs button at totallyiowa.com.